Welcome to the 7th section of the Mastering PrimeFaces video series. In this section, we will be looking at different components that allow us to create menus for our applications. We will also take a look at working with some images in our applications. In video 7.1, we will learn how to create a drop-down menu using the PrimeFaces MenuBar component. We will be adding a view to the PrimeAutoSales application, which will allow our users to create and edit a wiki page or email. If we look at the PrimeFaces showcase, we can see that the MenuBar component creates a menu much like something that you've seen in a desktop application such as Office or a mail client. The MenuBar can contain a series of submenu items, each consisting of menu item objects. The menu items can be bound to URLs or action methods that reside in controller classes. Let's get started creating our MenuBar. To begin, we're going to create a new view within the administrative portion of the PrimeAutoSales application. We'll use this view to construct a mini word processing editor for constructing wiki pages and email messages. Let's begin by going to our IDE and right-clicking on the admin folder, selecting New, and creating a new XHTML file. Let's name this file MessageCenter.xhtml and click Finish. Go ahead and replace the contents of our new view with those that are in the current users.xhtml view. Next, remove everything within the UIDefine element so that we can create our new view contents within. The first element should be a form, and then we will place the menu bar as the first child element of the form. We will not add any attributes to this menu. Now, for the structure of the menu, we want to create a simple editing menu with the option to create a new email or message templates. Of course, we will not fully implement this solution in this video, but imagine that we would like for this menu to provide options required for basic editing of text. Therefore, this menu will be small, but it will be good enough to get an idea for how to construct a full-fledged menu for your applications. Each menu button is composed via a menu item component. A menu item can be pressed to trigger an action method, or it can navigate to a URL, perhaps a help menu or a website for information regarding a particular function of the menu. We will add a drop-down menu as the first option, creating a file option menu much like that seen in many desktop apps. To add a drop-down, we need to add a P submenu component to the menu bar, and we will give it a label of File. We can also add an icon if we wish by specifying the icon attribute. In this case, we will assign a PrimeFaces standard icon of UI-icon-disk. If you're interested in looking through all of the PrimeFaces icons, you can visit the URL that is displayed on your screen now. Now, the submenu component creates a drop-down when added to the main level of a menu bar, but it can also create a horizontal menu when nested within another submenu. We will add another submenu within the File menu and label it New. This time, we will not add an icon. As mentioned previously, menu item components are used to add functionality to the menu. We want to add two action buttons within the New submenu, one for creating a new email and another for creating a new wiki page. Let's add the first menu item providing a value of wiki page and add an action listener attribute, which we will leave null for the time being. We'll also add an update attribute so that we can perform some partial page rendering once the button has been selected. We'll be invoking the action using Ajax, so the partial page rendering is required to change the content of the page depending upon the option selected. Let's add another similar menu item with a value of message. Provide the same attributes for that menu item. Now, let's add another option directly below the New submenu, and we will make this a menu item of Open, which will be used to open an existing wiki page for editing. We will actually supply null values for this menu item for the time being, as we'll be wiring it up to action methods in a few minutes. Let's add one final menu item with a value of Exit, and this time we'll specify the URL attribute rather than the action listener attribute. We want to specify the URL of the application home page, so specify a / for this attribute. Since the menu bar is going to be basic, we only require one more menu drop-down on the menu bar, Add another P submenu item as a direct child of the menu bar, directly under the File submenu. Let's provide a label attribute of Edit and an icon of UI-icon-pencil. Okay, we'll add 3 menu items to this dropdown, one for bold, another for underline, and a third for italic. Specify null action listener attributes for each of these menu items for now, as well as null update attributes. Again, we'll fill these in later. It's also possible to add other components to the top level menu bar by adding a facet with the name of options. This can be handy for adding a search field or a top level button. Anything within the options facet is added to the rightmost of the menu bar. Let's add an options facet and we'll add an input text for searching. Set the value attribute to null for now and set the placeholder attribute to search ... so that there is a watermark indicating that this is a search box. Let's simulate a logout button by adding the P command button to the options facet and setting the value attribute to logout. Let's set the action attribute to MessageCenterController.logout and the update attribute to MessageCenterBody. We know that this action method does not yet exist, so let's create it. To begin, let's construct a new controller class for use as the backing bean for the new view. Right-click on the org.packed.PrimeAutoSales.jsf package and create a new Java class by the name of MessageCenterController. Once it opens, make it a JSF Managed Bean Controller by annotating it with named and session scoped, since the scope is session-based. Lastly, make the class implement serializable. Add a new public method named logout with a void return type and accepting node parameters. In the implementation, create a string field named message and set it to logged out. Next, call upon facescontext.getCurrentInstance.addMessage and create a new faces message that contains our message string. Now, when the user clicks on the logout button, we should see the faces message displayed. That's it for the menu. Now, after the menu, we're going to create a panel with an ID of Message Center Body. And inside of the panel, create a small panel grid to hold the labels and input text components for an email address and subject field. So let's add a 2-column panel grid, and we'll add a P output label for email, specifying a false for the render attribute for now. Set the value to email, and then create the corresponding P input text component, specifying an ID of email and a null value for now. Next, create the same pair of components for a field named subject. Again, let's set the rendered attribute to false for now. Lastly, close the panel grid and create a P input text area component with an ID of email message. Set the value to null and rendered to false. Since this is an input text area, we need to specify cols and rows. So set cols equal 150 and rows equals 10 for now. This can be tweaked later as needed. Next, let's create another input text area using all of the same attribute specifications, but this time assign an ID of wiki. Lastly, let's close the panel. At this point, since we have all the component values to null, we should be able to run the code and see the initial UI. As you can see, the menu is laid out directly above our text area, and as we hover over the various menu options, it reacts much like the menu of a standard desktop application. If you recall, we set up the URL for the exit option, so clicking that menu item will return you to the application home. Now that we have the menu UI, we can create the back-end business logic and wire up the action listeners and partial page rendering as needed. Let's go to the Message Center Controller class and add a private field of string type and name it message type. Next, create a final static string named message_wiki and assign the value of W. Create a second static final string field named message_mail and assign the value of M. Encapsulate the fields to create accessor methods for the message type field. This field will be used to determine which UI components are rendered on screen. Let's set the message type value to message_wiki initially. Now, let's set up an action method for the menu. For the sake of brevity, we'll set up a single action method at this time, and we'll wire all of the menu items to the same method. Create a public method with no return value named edit. Let's accept a string argument for this method, and we will pass the name of the currently selected menu item for this test. In the method, we'll simply create a Faces message and add it to the Faces context for display. The message will display the name of the currently selected menu item. That's it for the back end. Like I said, we're going to keep this simple for the demonstration, but in a production application, we would likely have different action methods for each of the menu items. Now that we've implemented the backend controller class, let's go back to the messagecenter.xhtml view and wire the menu up. First, add a pMessages component as the first child within the Message Center body panel. This component can be used to display our menu messages. Second, let's set the update attribute for each of the components to Message Center body, since we want to partially render that panel within the view when any of the menu items is selected. Next, set the action listener for the new submenu items to the Message Center controller.setMessageType method, passing a W for the wiki selection and an M for the email selection. Now let's modify the editing menu items by changing the action listener attribute for any of the menu components that we have set to null, so that it now points to the Message Center controller.edit name of the menu item, passing the string-based name of the menu item that is being selected. Lastly, we need to specify the rendering for our email versus wiki components within the Message Center body panel. To do so, modify the render attribute value to specify conditional using JSF-EL, comparing the message type to M or W depending upon the component that we wish to display. For instance, if the current message type is wiki, then we will hide the email, subject, and email message components. Okay, that's about as sophisticated as we will get for this menu test. Let's go ahead and save everything and run the application. As you can see, when we click to select one of the new message types, the different components change on screen. Also, when any of the edit menu items are selected, an appropriate message is displayed on screen. Note that all PrimeFaces menus can be created programmatically, as the menu metadata is defined using org.primefaces.model.menuModel instances, and PrimeFaces provides a default menu model implementation. That wraps it up for the first of the menu components that we'll dive into, the menu bar. The menu bar is sophisticated, but it does have a targeted purpose. Therefore, PrimeFaces does offer a bevy of other menu options so that you can find the one that suits the needs of your application the best. In the next video, we'll take a look at the slide menu.